following program is rated TV MALV. It contains strong language and violence. It is intended only for mature audiences.
The port town in Macau, on the southeast coast of China. The gentle townfolk are about to awake to an unimaginable horror. The local police are doing their best. But who could have ever guessed the delicious secret?
I once made the argument with an old friend that gambling, just like any other vice, is fine in moderation and that it's not as dangerous as Maid seemed. But he, being older and wiser than me, reiterated the fact that through his own experiences and wisdom, that if gambling was so harmless as I had made it seem, why had he personally seen it rip families apart? Why had he personally seen men sink their lives away into insurmountable debt, corrupting individuals with a disease that they no longer had control over? And as we'll come to learn of the horrific and twisted case of one of China's most infamous crimes, those words, once spoken to me, echoed through my mind. How could what seemed like an innocent wager or a bet between friends result in the extermination of an entire family? And even worse, a macabre rumor of mutilation and inadvertent cannibalism that would shock China and the rest of this world to this day. To lay the groundwork for the story, we'll need to learn of those involved, and this gruesome story centers around a man named Huang ZiHang. Huang was born on the Chinese mainland as Chen Shuilang before immigrating to Hong Kong in the 1970s. A man always known to have shady ties and activities with links to Hong Kong's underworld. Huang also had several identities over the years, keeping up facades and different backstories, especially when he lived in neighboring areas. In 1973, he became involved in confrontations with a man who had allegedly owed him money. For what reasons is unknown, but Huang would later kill this man over the debt. He fled to Canton, where he settled for several years. During his stay in the Guangdong province, Huang burned his own fingertips to prevent him from being linked to any crime committed in the past and avoid future capture. After living in Guangzhou for several years, Huang married the daughter of his landlord, named Mrs. Li. The woman's family disapproved of the marriage and disapproved especially of Huang, so the couple left and moved to Macau. Macau is a special administrative region of the People's Republic of China, with a population of about 700,000 people, formerly a Portuguese colony. The territory of Portuguese Macau was first leased to Portugal by the Ming Dynasty as a trading post in 1557. Portugal paid an annual rent and administrated the territory under Chinese sovereignty. The colony remained under Portuguese rule until the handover of 1999 to China. And in our story, as time goes on and Huang becomes settled in to his newfound home and grows deeper involved in the gambling scene of Macau, Huang and the patriarch of the Zhang family, Zhang Lin, grew closer as well, to the point where you would call the two friends or even acquaintances. But during a night of socializing between the two while drinking and gambling in 1984, Huang and Zhang became involved in a series of high-risk bets with each other. How the wagers began is still unknown. Whether it was a joke or not between the two men is still unclear, but what we do know is that in the end, Huang had won over 180,000 yuan, or patakas, from Zhang. The current conversion value would be almost 25,000 USD. Zhang Lim and his family were never going to be able to pay the debt, so they made a verbal agreement that Zhang would hand over his family's restaurant, the Eight Immortals, mortgage and ownership to Huang if the debt was not paid out within a year. Huang agreed to the terms and went on with his life, so he says. However, after a year, Zhang Lin and the family had stopped paying for the debt, and Huang had claimed even began to gamble and lose money again, essentially refusing to live up to their end of the bargain. Huang later told the authorities that due to this extended period of time and loss, the Zhang family owed him interest in their debt, the total allegedly being about 600,000 yuan, or patakas, converted over $80,000 USD, which obviously the family at this time had no plans or means on repayment. This would turn out to be fatal for not only Zhang Lin, but for his entire family. The Zhang family were last seen alive by a delivery man on the afternoon of August 4th, 1985, who was there dropping off supplies for the family's restaurant. He had claimed all was normal with the family when he had last saw them, and that nothing had seemed out of the ordinary. But that evening, after the restaurant had closed for business, Huang entered the establishment while the rest of the family was cleaning and finishing up for the day. He demanded that Zhang Lin and the rest of the family pay the 30,000 yuan that they owed him. He later even claimed that he had tried to negotiate down to a lower price, but still, Zhang Lin refused to pay. Huang grew increasingly agitated when Zhang Lin later refused to turn over the ownership of the restaurant as well. In this verbal altercation, eventually Huang became irate and physically aggressive, taking one of Zhang's sons hostage and holding him to the end of a broken glass bottle and forcing the other 8 family members to bind and gag each other one by one. Huang later claimed that while trying to tie them up, one of the family members, a girl, broke free and started to scream and shout for help, causing him to stab her in the neck with the glass bottle he had brandished as a weapon. As the blood began to pool around him and the distraught family members who had just seen what had happened, Huang, realizing what he had just done and the severity and consequences of his actions, had made up his mind then and there. There must be no witnesses. He then proceeded to kill all 9 family members, one after another, either by strangulation or with the broken glass bottle that he had initially used, brutally putting an end to the entire Zhang family in a bloody mess over something that should have never taken place to begin with, in the supposed friendly wager and gambling debt between the 2 men. In an attempt to completely avoid suspicion from anyone left in the Zhang family, he briefly left the restaurant during or after the killings to lure one of Zhang Lin's remaining sisters, who hadn't been initially present at the restaurant during the attack, to where once she was inside, she was brutally butchered as well, joining alongside her other 9 family members. While lying in a bloody mess and in the pile of the bodies of the men, women, and children of the Zhang family, Huang dismembered them over the course of an 8-hour period, meticulously butchering their bodies into segments and pieces, wrapping them into black trash bags, which he then dumped, some into the ocean or threw others into different dumpsters throughout the city. Afterward, he carefully cleaned the restaurant, scrubbing all the blood splatter and remnants of the crime. He recovered some of the family's money and a safe key from Zhang's corpse, and spent the night at the Zhang's nearby family residence. The next morning, after the killings, when the same delivery man from the day previous found the Eight Immortals restaurant now locked and closed with a note on the door stating it would be closed for 3 days, the delivery man immediately sensed and suspected something just wasn't right, considering he had just seen the entire family 24 hours before, and all had seemed normal and well. This caused the delivery man to pay a visit to the Zhang family residence, where after knocking, to his surprise, Hong answered the door and claimed that the family had just taken a trip to the mainland and that he was just watching over the property while they were gone. The driver considered this highly unusual, seeming that no one had mentioned it to him the day previous about taking a trip, but not unwarranted, as Huang was known to be well associated with the family. As the next couple of days passed, on the 8th of August 1985, a swimmer found 8 pieces of human limbs in Haksa Beach, also called Black Sand Beach. It was originally theorized that the body parts came from a group of illegal immigrants from mainland China who had been eaten by sharks, but after a careful examination of the limbs, it revealed that precise cuts had been used to sever them. This finding prompted a police investigation and a search for potential missing persons. Over the next few days, forensic evidence determined that the limbs belonged to at least 4 separate individuals. A further 3 body parts were found on local beaches over the following week. These findings generated significant interest in the press, and several theories were raised as to what could have happened and what was responsible for the limbs. As this all unfolded, and police began digging deeper and deeper into the dismembered bodies washing up on the shore of Macau, meanwhile, Hong had reopened and continued to operate the Eight Immortals restaurant. Again, this was considered unusual by its customers, but not unwarranted, as he was a known associate of the family and had been previously seen in the restaurant before. But now, after the killings, he was in possession of the restaurant's ownership documents and paperwork. Not only that, but he had also begun collecting rent money from the family's former home after foraging and stealing the paperwork and rights to their house. Eventually, Macau police, after intense investigation, had traced the severed washed-up limbs to the Zhang family, who had been reported missing by concerned relatives. When the police arrived, they immediately grew suspicious of Hong when learning of his activities and involvement with the family. Police searched his bank holdings, finding documents belonging to Zhang Lim and student ID cards belonging to the rest of his children, confirming what they had initially suspected in Hong. Hong, after learning of the police suspicion, attempted to flee for mainland China, but was captured on the 28th of September 1986. He was tried and eventually convicted of 10 counts of murder and found guilty of the brutal Zhang family slaying. Due to the macabre nature of Hong's crimes and arrest, and the fact that he had continued to run the Eight Immortals restaurant for almost 2 months after dismembering its former owners, and the fact that only partial pieces of the family were ever recovered. This resulted in the dark urban legend that Hong had dismembered and ground the family and used them as human meat that he eventually baked into the restaurant's famous pork buns, which rumors and legends state customers had complained or said tasted odd or different than normal after the killings when Hong was in charge of the restaurant. Eventually, the final body parts of the family were found in a trash dump in 1989. The twisted and dark theory surrounding the pork buns would become famous, and even to this day, many true crime enthusiasts and Macau locals know this case as the Pork Bun Murders. Hong, in real life, would never admit to the pork bun theory, but just like most urban legends, discerning fact from fiction will prove to be challenging. This real-life case of semi-modern times of the 1980s in China closely resembles an urban legend of 19th century England in the character of Sweeney Todd, who first appeared as the villain of the penny dreadful serial The Strings of Pearls in 1846. The original tale became a London legend. Sweeney Todd, a barber from Fleet Street, murders his customers with a straight razor and gives their corpses to Mrs. Lovett, his partner in crime and accomplice, who dismembers them and bakes their flesh into meat pies, all being eventually served and eaten by unsuspecting customers, which does sound eerily similar to the case of Hong's pork buns and the Eight Immortals restaurant. And just like all good urban legends or dark tales, the exact truth will never be known. After his arrest for the family's murder, Hong was attacked in prison by another inmate only 1 day after his conviction. He was sent to a hospital to recover, there where he attempted to escape without success. On the 6th of October in 1986, Hong had confessed and detailed to investigators on how and why he had killed the Zhang family. While in custody, his second and successful fatal suicide attempt took place on the 4th of December 1986, when Hong managed to cut his wrist with a sharpened bottle cap. He left a suicide note and a letter to a local newspaper explaining his actions and stating in his note that his suicide was not due to the guilt of his crimes, but rather to escape chronic asthma that had plagued him most of his life. After his death, what was left of his burned fingertips linked him to the first and original 1973 murder in Hong Kong. The recovered remains of the Zhang family that were able to be found were later cremated and the ashes scattered off the coast of Macau by their living relatives. After Hong's arrest, the Eight Immortals restaurant was immediately closed and seized by the police. It was resold by early 1987 and has seen different owners throughout the years. But today, the former restaurant and the apartments above it, where the site of the killings took place, are now part of the Baxian Hotel in Macau. And while the Eight Immortals and Hong and the Zhang family may be gone, the dark impression and memory of these bloody events will be left behind forever. Even now, in China, this case lives on in infamy, with several different adaptations and retellings through cinema, the most famous of which was the 1993 horror/crime drama called The Untold Story, starring actor Anthony Wong, whose character is directly inspired from Hong. Directed by Herman Yao, the brutal, bloody film depicts in gruesome detail the events that unfolded at the Eight Immortals restaurant the night of the killings, and the events following. And for anyone interested in this case, it's definitely a good watch. Also, a lower budget version from 2002, a film called Human Pork Buns, is a remake of the 1993 film. As we move on, this case will continue to captivate the public and may not be mentioned in true crime circles as much as it should, but without a doubt, this case will be and remain one of Macau's and China's most notorious crimes ever committed. And guys, that'll be the end of the video. I just want to wrap up in saying that this case was very interesting, just like most of the cases I look into. It was pretty brutal, and the violence that took place was pretty extraordinary. The movie that depicts this story, the Untold Story, the 1993 film with Anthony Wong, is a pretty good watch. Again, it's pretty gory and it's pretty brutal. When it comes to the details of the case, it's pretty accurate, and visually it's pretty compelling. So again, thank you guys if you've listened all the way to the end. Christmas is approaching here in the States pretty soon, so I just want to wish everybody a happy holiday, Merry Christmas, take care of yourself, and please subscribe or like the video if you enjoyed it. It helps out immensely. Thank you.